Welcome to another episode of The Local Dive. This is Alex Scott, joined by only Ashlyn Portero today.
Hello.
It's a light crew. Dean is battling bacterial pneumonia, so he is out sick, but is planning to be, as we're recording this later than we normally would in the week, so he is planning to be back in the pulpit on Sunday. He's feeling better on the mend, but it's been a rough 10 days, I guess. So he's out, and then Jacob's at the gym or something, and and Jacob actually is in class, so he's not able to be here to produce and provide insight. So we are excited to jump into another episode. We are calling this episode The Pencil Dive, or A Pencil Dive, which was one of many titles that we came up with.
It was the most
definitely the most, yes, definitely the most appropriate of the titles discussed. So we won't have a full deep dive, but we will have a pencil dive. But before we do, we still will wade into the shallow end. And in the pencil dive, we're going to be talking about city groups and those prepare to launch for us this fall. In just a week or so, we'll be having a large city group kickoff event on Sunday night. So in the spirit of groups and small groups and city groups, our shallow end is we're going to discuss kind of fictional groups that you would like to be a part of, or maybe you could see yourself fitting into. So is there a fictional group that you would join or want to be in?
There's so many. I'm like really, in a lot of ways, just embracing the nostalgia of all the 90s trends that have come back. And that's also bleeding into like for me, like the 2000s culture as well. Cause I was young in the 90s, like elementary school age, well, toddler to elementary school age. So
it was a wide,
it was roughly the first decade of my life.
Yeah.
But so all of that to say, I've been listening to a lot of 90s music, particularly leaning hard into like the Cranberries.
Oh, wow.
And the Cores and like that whole genre.
The Wallflowers.
Yeah, like some of that. So I don't really know a lot about those bands, but I'm like, maybe I would want to be a part of the Cranberries. And they're like some kind of 90s like alt pop group. That's when I think about like a group that I would want to be a part of. I'm like, that's kind of my jam right now musically. Probably most people are like, ugh, that
I was
sounds
trying to
awful,
remember like what the
Cranberries
sang.
sing. They sing like that, like Dreams is one of their songs. Linger.
Yes, I was gonna say Linger was the one that I was like, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have to?
Yeah. It's a very like niche sound, so it's probably not for everyone's taste, but I'm feeling it. And then I also just recently started rewatching Gilmore Girls. So in terms of
Stars Hollow,
yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's like a group, but
Yeah,
in terms of like a fictional community that I would want to move into, Gilmore Girls, the Stars Hollow crew would be at the very top of my list, I think. Man, if I think about like books or other culture, I mean, any kind of like, I love sitcoms. We have talked about sitcoms before. So there's lots of sitcoms that I would like to just,
insert
myself into through the decades, really. So
if you're going into Gilmore Girls, where do you see yourself fitting? Like,
that's a good question.
Like Rory's, is Rory the girl?
Yes, Rory is the daughter.
The daughter, yes. Yeah, because I guess it's two female leads.
Yes.
Lorelai's the mom.
The Gilmore Girls.
And then, what's like the friend who like kind of stinks, but also like
Paris?
Yes, I think so.
Paris like has a lot going on, but you kind of feel bad for her by the end. Like she's humanized.
They don't like each other in the beginning.
Yes, they're like mortal enemies. Oh man, that's a really good question. I mean, growing up, I was always like, I want to be Rory's best friend, like, which she has a really cool best friend, Lane, in the show. So I would like to maybe be like in with Lane and Rory. Although now it's funny watching this show as an adult, because as a high schooler, when I first started watching it, I of course identified with Rory.
Sure.
And then now watching it, like I way more identify with Lorelai, who in the show, like in the first season of the show, is like in her early 30s. And so it's
That's
a
like
weird, yeah,
not full circle, but
it's a weird experience. You're like, wow, like your perspectives do change over time. So yeah, somewhere in there. But then I'd also want to be like best friends with Lorelai and her friend Suki, who is like the chef at the end that she runs.
Yes.
So there's just, you could insert me almost anywhere in that whole fictional neighborhood, and I would be happy.
Is Stars Hollow that's a real place? Is it a fictional place? Is it a real place?
Okay, Stars Hollow is a fictional place, which was heartbreaking for me when I first learned it. However, and most of it was filmed on a set, like in Beverly Hills. A lot of people, like if you just do a surface level Google, I'm like just a, deep fan.
Yeah.
You're nerding like out on Gilmore Girls for a second. If you do like a quick Google, I think Washington Depot is the town in Connecticut that it like inspired some.
Okay.
But the opening scene, so if you watch the whole series, the opening scene, like when Lorelai, it opens, this is going back to not the Cranberries, but I think it's either the Laws or Sixpence None the Richer, but the There She Goes song is playing. And Lorelai is like walking through the town, and she walks into Luke's coffee shop, which becomes like a major setting of the show. But Luke's in that first opening scene of the series is different than the rest. And I looked that up, and that is actually a main street in a town in Vermont, and I'm forgetting the name of it.
So there's like parts of it that are sort of real life.
Yeah, inspired by real life towns, most of it filmed on set.
Yeah, so I think if I like was going, I mean, one of my I don't know, fictional groups that I would want to be inserted in, because I don't think I'm any of these characters, would be Seinfeld. Like, just because I love the show, and it's sort of like the restaurant in Seinfeld, like the restaurant that they show every time before they're in the restaurant,
right?
Like, is a real restaurant in New York City.
Okay.
It's Tom's Restaurant.
Okay. Have you been?
I have not been. Like, I've not eaten there, but I've been. I've seen it.
Okay,
nice. It's really close to Columbia's campus and on the Upper West Side. So I have seen it. I've taken pictures in front of it. Like I was there. I was like, gotta do it.
Is this the No Soup for You
No,
restaurant?
that's like the Soup Nazis like restaurant. This is like different. Just the cafe that they're diner that they're always in.
Okay, gotcha.
So that is like, Seinfeld. I just love the show. I mean, like, I'm not Jerry. Just for like that, the thing. I think the thing is, like, most people think I want to be like the cool main character.
Yeah.
And like, you never are.
No.
Like no one ever
not.
is.
No.
So like, I know I'm not Jerry, but I also know I'm definitely not George, and I'm definitely not Kramer. Like, and for obvious reasons, I'm not Elaine. So of those four, like,
so you're the missing link.
Maybe
in that whole group.
I mean, I think it's kind of a perfect group, so I don't want to say there's a missing link, but like, I think I'd be like a random, just sort of like, I don't know, adjacent character,
like a good
that kind of comes and goes.
Okay, but that's an underrated role in like a sitcom, is like the good recurring, like, kind of supporting character.
Yeah, like Putty or Newman, but not Putty or Newman. Like you said, a good supporting character.
Yeah.
I feel like
Newman
they're
is
characters.
Just like,
they're just not good.
So memorable,
yes.
but not really one you'd want to be.
Yes. So college me would say I'd want to be in Entourage, which is like problematic for multiple reasons. But again, same kind of thing. Like, are you familiar with the show?
The only thing I know is that one of the main guys was in Devil Wears Prada.
Okay. I'm not sure who that
was. The guy
was.
with the dark curly hair.
Okay.
Adrian something?
Yeah. So he's like the main, he's like kind of, I mean, they're sort of all leads, but like.
And this is not a reality show. This is a fictional show.
It's totally fictional, yeah. So there's a guy, his character is Vinny Chase. It's Adrian whatever, Adrian Grenier.
Okay.
I knew it was going to come up, so I looked it up. He is like a movie star, and his little groupie boy entourage posse moves out to LA with him, and then it's sort of like the story of them pursuing their dreams. And
that's fun.
There's E is one of the characters, and he's like his manager, or he ends up being his his manager. Yeah, I think it's his manager. And like that, I'm like, okay, that's one where like role, I'm like, actually that could be me, but I no longer am like, yes, Entourage is a great show, because it's
right.
It's not. So
that's interesting, because I feel like you don't see a lot of shows that are about like a guy group.
Yes.
Like, unless it's like I think about like Friends, or even like more modern like New Girl, where it's like male female relationships are so integral to that, but like that's kind of sounds different.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of all male leads, which I think is like the uniqueness. I mean, it's definitely still, I'm
sure
the interaction of male female relationships.
I'm sure that becomes central to the storyline.
But yes, it does.
Yeah, a lot of multiple male leads that's interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I said it was HBO's male response to Sex and the City, because they kind of coincided.
Okay.
I think when they like both were coming out. So
okay.
Yeah.
To add one that is like more on the edifying end. So a couple years ago, I learned about the Rabbit Room, which is to be honest with you, I think community probably is a good word for it, because it's not an organization, I wouldn't say. I mean, it has like a brand and a website and things like that, but maybe a collective or maybe a community. It's just kind of geared towards like Christian thought and the arts and, creative work for the gospel. Mm-hmm. But I mean, writers, artists, singer-songwriters, many poets, like many different people are a part of it. And so anyways, that's like a real life community. Like they have a house, and like Andrew Peterson is, and his brother, I think, like basically run it, or are central to it. But that's like a community. I think when I think about like really life-giving, interesting Christian communities, like existing outside of the local church, obviously I think all those people that are a part of it are part of their own churches, but outside of, like what we're going to talk about, a church, local church, small group, like a really specific drilled down group. That's a community. I think that's awesome that something like that exists. And I know it's not the only one, but it's neat to think about like Christians forming communities around, for them, kind of these central ideas and values. And that's something that, I would like to, like be a part of or have, I think we have some of those in terms of like loose kind of like-minded people at City Church who, have similar interests and things like that. But I think it's neat that that's such an intentional community that a lot of people kind of live and work and just sort of enjoy that time together. So.
Yeah, they sort of fuel each other's
individual
creative pursuits for the sake of the common good and the gospel flourishing and things like that.
So I think that's a neat thing.
Yeah, that's good. What fictional communities do you see Dean in?
Since he's not here.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's like on the fly. I was trying to think.
Yeah, what would he be a part of? I mean, there for a while, he was so into Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
And
is like, has the eccentricities to sort of fit in if you,
like,
if you
like
know him
well.
Like
a Big Bang Theory, but like for people who are like obsessed with sports.
Yes. He would be like the sports. He would be like the sports nerd on the Big Bang.
Yes.
Like,
hopefully he's not offended by that. But I think anyone listening would agree with that.
He'd be best friends with Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah, and he would bring like all of his like great personality to it.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very spot on analysis. And if you're offended, Dean, sorry.
He could be like the character that's like the bridge, where it's like he like, because of his like, obsessive sports knowledge, he like somehow is in with all of like the other nerds, but then he also like has this other like life where, not like a double life, but like,
right.
but like
an outside of like space nerd or whatever.
Like he has like the nerd friend group, and then he has like his like, I don't want to be like his jock friend group. Now I'm just like setting up all these terrible stereotypes for our lead pastor. So I apologize. I think the people get what I'm trying to say.
Yes. I think if you know Dean, especially if you know Dean, like, yeah, it's sort of like a blend of like.
And that's kind of him. He has friends in all different types
spaces.
Of all spaces.
Yes, definitely. That works. Before we dig ourselves
a
swimming pool sized hole, we'll take the pencil dive into
someone please
the segment on
someone throw me a life raft and get me out of this whirlpool I created for myself.
Get the shepherd's hook and which, like, I'm claiming those shepherd's hooks. I mean, hopefully they've never been used because that means somebody's like in trouble. But like, I'm claiming that they like don't ever come off the gate on the pool. You know, it's like somebody's jumping in.
And
they're
you
not like
feeling really strong.
Yeah, here, hold on. Let me get this 35-foot long pole and
that's
pull
gonna,
you in.
Snap at the other end. Yeah. Anyways. I digress.
Yeah. So anyways, all right, city group. So as we mentioned in the intro, our city group kickoff is this Sunday, August 29th in the evening at 5 o'clock at our Sessions campus. And so that'll be a time for us to gather together, see people from kind of all city groups, get more information about groups, join groups, all things city group, but as we kick off the semester. So kind of with that in mind, one of the things that we were thinking we would talk about is this is really what is the purpose of small group ministry? How do they function here at the church? And maybe we can speak into some ways about kind of benefits that we've seen of either personally through our own lives or through the lives of others, the way that kind of living out the gospel in community helps shape us and kind of conform us to the image of Christ and just allow us to grow in our understanding of theology and the scriptures and all of those things. So maybe first I'll just throw this out there. How would you just describe and talk about the culture of groups at City Church? What are they? Why do we do them? Those kind of things.
Yeah. So for the person who has church background, I think it's easy to say like a small group Bible study. People tend to get, what that means. The way that we approach that at City Church, our groups are they are a place to be equipped and to study the scriptures. They're heavy on like community and relational connection. And so, in a different way than like an equip class or, certainly a Sunday morning where you come in, you're probably going to mingle or talk with people there. Like it's a chance to see other people. But you're sitting in rows, and like to use kind of like one of those old church group analogies, like rows versus circles.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting in a row, like more of a class feel. The focus there is on like the content and the learning. Whereas in a city group, it's meant to be more than just, you show up for an hour or an hour and a half on your one night of a week. And then like, you don't ever interact with those people. Like these are actually the people that are in your group are the people that hopefully you're communicating with throughout the week. Like, I mean, let's just call it what it is. Like, hopefully they're becoming your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so people that you socialize with, of course, invite others into that. And then hopefully through that group, like through studying the Bible, through growing in your faith, through encouraging one another, you are fueled and equipped to then go out and live missionally and hopefully love your neighbor and serve others and try to, share your faith with other people, all of those things. And so I think of like groups as kind of almost this, this little system of like turning wheels where it's like you come in, you're built up, and then you're sent back out. And that's kind of week in and week out. And so that's kind of how our groups operate, and we really want to see people connected to them. I would say like at City Church, and I'll be curious to hear kind of how you would answer this. Like, I think the people who are in groups, we have a really strong core of groups. I definitely think there's like some outer rings where people aren't as connected or maybe think, that's not my thing, or, I have friends or have community in another way. And not to say that, city groups certainly are not the only way you can have a biblical community. I'll actually say right now, I'm presently not in one. I'm leading one of our women's book clubs for our women's discipleship initiative, but I'm not a part of a city group right now. So I'm not saying it's the only thing, but, and this is even a challenge to myself, or to others who maybe have never experienced it before. I've had great experiences in the past that I can speak to later. It really, I think, is something that it helps people also develop rhythms that like we just don't naturally develop through culture, because city groups really, in a good way, kind of interrupt your week with this constant gathering together, you know, like Sunday, where it begins to be something that you kind of build your week around, and it really fuels really every part of your week, relationships, learning, your time with the Lord, the way that you think about things, you know, the way that you think about living missionally. So anyways, those are kind of some initial thoughts, but what would you add or fill in to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of is all, you know, it is all of those things. I think you've encapsulated kind of what they are and how they function well. I mean, it is Bible study, it is community, and hopefully it's people together living on or being spurred to live on mission together. And so sometimes that's, you know, individually, like, hey, will you pray for my coworker who I'm trying to share the gospel with, and I just need encouragement in that, you know, hey, did you have a chance to talk to your coworker about the gospel this week? Oh, actually I did. Let me tell you about it. You know, it's really fruitful. Keep praying for him. Or no, I didn't. Thanks for that reminder. Like, I need to put him or her back on my heart and continue praying and hoping that the Lord, you know, so there's that, the sort of like missional encouragement that comes through groups. There is good accountability to, you know, where people they're closer into your life, and so they can see aspects of your life that may not be as apparent in passing in 10 minutes on a Sunday morning. I think for our church as well, specifically, it's where a large church, and really like large church can be anything if you're not, you know, in good community within the church. You know, 75 people can feel like a large church if you don't know anyone. And so for us, where, you know, like it really is where a big church becomes small, and you can actually have meaningful, lasting, you know, deep friendships, and people to walk through the good things and the bad things with you, you know, kind of with, and kind of bear those burdens. You bear the burdens of them. And I think one of the primary functions of them is to spend time in the Word, to be encouraged, through God's Word, through the Scriptures, and to grow in our understanding and application of God's Word in our life, kind of on a weekly basis. I think one of the other things that, because of the way that we model groups, is really helpful, and hopefully reinforces the priority of Sunday morning for us as a church, is that because most of our groups are following the Sunday morning teaching, it's a great way to say, okay, this is what I heard on Sunday. And there's not application in the preaching, but sometimes it can be more general, and other times it's more specific. And so it's a great place to kind of drill down into, okay, this is the text that was preached, or this is the book of the Bible that was preached. Not what does this mean for me in the sense of like, what do I get from it? But how does what was preached, the things that I was convicted by, you know, and over, how does that play out? And to allow other Christian brothers and sisters to speak into those things, I think is a really helpful thing. And for that to be done in community. So we don't just go home and think, well, you know what, I heard blank, and that means that, you know, this is the picture of Jesus that I have, and I'm just going to live that way. Like, It gives us the opportunity to say, okay, this is what I heard on Sunday. Help me seek this in the Scriptures. Is this correct? And for people to go, you know, hopefully other brothers and sisters who are walking in step with the Holy Spirit, and who can say, yeah, or yeah, kind of, or not at all, you know, and that can help kind of keep us from erring in our theology and in our teaching. So I think those are things that I would add to that, you know, but it really does. It becomes I mean, you know, at one point we called them community groups. Like, it is a way for the church to have meaningful community. And I think that's a little bit of a shift too that we've had over the last, you know, kind of, sometimes there may be a little bit of pendulum swings, I should say, where we've leaned more into community, more into, you know, Bible and theology, and realizing that both of there is, not that there's a happy medium, but that they're both important. We need Bible and theology in community. And so that's a great way for those to take place. I wanted to dive into one of the things that, you mentioned, like you're not currently in a group, but you're in community, right? Like you're not living the Christian life isolated,
right.
Which, no one should. That also doesn't mean everyone needs to be in a city group, but what do you, if it's for you personally in this season, or for others, like we haven't been in an official city group for like the last year and a half or so either. We're joining a group this semester, but what are the things that, that we've seen kind of as barriers to people joining groups, and what are sort of acceptable, I don't want to say excuses, but what are the acceptable things where it's like, this in this season, maybe I don't need that. And what are some that we can push back on and challenge people on?
Yeah, I think that's really good. Well, one of the first things that pops in my mind is that, over the last year and a half, we've all kind of had our regular rhythms of community disrupted, obviously, by the pandemic. And so I can sympathize with people who, feel like I've just kind of fallen out of that rhythm, or, when we switched all of our groups over to Zoom, that was great for a while. And I think people were so grateful to stay connected. But then we reached a point where everyone's like, I'm on Zoom all day because of my job or my kid's school. I'm exhausted. This really doesn't allow for a fruitful conversation anyways. So I think if that's you, if you're someone who's saying, like all of my rhythms were totally disrupted and I've just kind of gotten out of it and I don't really even know, like, what does my church offer right now, or what is it like to join back in a group? I think acknowledge that, like, there's of course grace for that, but now there's time and opportunity, to get back into it. So I think that's something that we can push back on is, people who have just said, I just kind of got out of it and I'm just not really doing anything anymore. It's like, okay, well, might be time to, to come back into that. I think if, hopefully I'm not trying to like make excuses for myself. If you are involved in other groups, where, you're walking with other people, you're regularly in communication with them, you're studying God's word together. And that could even be like, maybe you have a few friends that you come to church with on Sundays and, and you guys talk about the sermon and you go out to eat in the middle of the week, or you're there to, to pray for one another, to bear burdens. Community doesn't have to be that you fill out a form and sign up for something and you have a, weekly standing thing. It's not about so much the structure, but at the same time, community does involve those things. Like when you're regularly getting together with people, like you organize that, you make it happen. Like people are in your life, and so, like you said, it's not the only way to find community. There might be people at our church and there are who, their main community was formed through a serving team. A lot of our students, they are in city groups, but they also are in mentor groups if they're student leaders, and so there's other pockets, but I would say it's just important to make sure that you are a part of something. The other thing that I think it can be tricky for people, and I think probably the further you move into adulthood, this gets hard because it's easy to kind of settle into like a friend group, or maybe if you had a really strong friend group that you come out of college in, usually one of two things happens. One, that carries into adulthood and you just, that remains your group, and maybe a couple people come and go or change, but people settle into this, here's my core group of friends. And so they're not really motivated to reach out to others or to join in new things themselves because you feel like, well, I've got my circle. As Christians, we should really want to challenge that because we're always meant to be, looking for others that we can encourage, people that we can, how we can love our neighbors, and also just to welcome new people into our lives, maybe to be served by them or just to learn, to be around people who are different than the people that we're used to. And so, that's the body of Christ. Or another thing that will often happen is that people, for whatever reason, their group disbands or people move away or they move into a new phase of life. And then they're all of a sudden like without their comfortable core group of community. And that kind of can become an excuse for, I just can't find a group that fits for me. I don't feel like I connect anywhere. And I want to be sympathetic to that. But I also think, if you've gone, kids are so like nimble sometimes when it comes to friend making, and when you've gone a long time without having to really like live in that awkward space of giving it time to make friends, that can be hard, but adults have to do that too. Like sometimes we act like we don't have to do that, but we do. And so I think it's important to give it time and give yourself to it also. Don't show up like with a critical spirit, trying to find everything that's wrong with this group or this group of people. Like that's also not a very Christian way to approach things. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think about a women's group that I was in that kind of morphed and changed over a number of years. But when I think about the kind of core group, the 10 or so women who were a part of it, I mean, we did so much together, and it was really a group. It was in my kind of mid-20s, and so we were all post-college, but we had several women who were in their 30s, and even a couple of women who were married and had kids. And so it spanned life phases. It spanned, like a decade or so in age. But man, we were like, that was who we hung out with on the weekends. We made plans and had meals together and prayed for one another, and week in and week out, magically all of these women were able to make it work, everything from the, single grad student to the mom with 4 kids, that was just what we committed to. And to what I was able to learn from these women and, just being shaped by, you're so impacted by the people that you spend your time with. And so being with these women week in and week out, like that forms and shapes you. So I didn't like totally directly answer your question, but hopefully those are a few examples and just help people kind of think through some of the difficulties, but also some of the ways we need to be challenged when we approach kind of formal community or groups at church.
Yeah, I think like the 3 that I feel like I hear most commonly, I think you in some ways addressed all of them, are, we had a life phase change. So we had a kid, I moved from college to, I'm a young professional now, and all my friends have left, and like I had a group, and I just haven't gotten back into one, or my group kind of, the leader had to move, the leader moved and it didn't get picked up, and I just didn't find it. And then like usually in a lot of those kind of, I'll just say like transition times, it's really natural for people to kind of fall out of that rhythm for one reason or another. And they're not necessarily bad. Like sometimes when you have a newborn, like your life has radically changed, and you have to devote the bulk of your time to keep the baby alive and to function on 3 hours of sleep, and like it's not always the easiest thing. But I think there are in most of those cases, those interruptions should be seasonal, and I think where a lot of times people wrongly kind of stay in that limbo for so long is they're like, well, I didn't because of blank, understandably. And then it's like, now it's just kind of easier not to. Or, and then the other one is like, well, this, like, I just can't find a group that's for me. And there are a lot of factors, like, because so much, I mean, I think about like, if the church is to make disciples, as much as city groups should be about community, that should be a driving force of what they're doing. Like the way that community is shaping us, it should be to be better followers of Jesus. And so, as you think about that, it's like, yeah, we need to find community. We need to be made into better disciples. But like, to your point, that does take time. Like it's hard to go and spend an hour or 2 hours with a group of people you've never met and be like, they're just not for me. And so I think like there is something to be said about, hey, I went to a group for 4 weeks, a semester, that like, they're great people. I have nothing against them. Like I just didn't quite fit. But what I think happens, and I've been guilty of this at times, is like, I just go, I don't fit. I'm just going to take a little time off, and in reality, it's like, yeah, I didn't really feel like I fit, but that doesn't negate the fact that I should be in Christian community. And so, I think like the encouragement there, if that's you, is like just try and stick it out a little bit, because it does take time to develop relationships. It takes time to go, oh, this is sort of how I fit and function in the group. And I think there's a responsibility on the group, if it's especially in an established group. It can be intimidating to walk in and be like,
For sure.
oh, these 12 people know each other really well, and they, there's kind of like little, not intentionally clicky, but like inside jokes, or they laugh about things and you're like, oh, I don't really know what you're talking about, but right. and so it can be sometimes hard to break into a group, but over time it's probably going to happen. And so like my encouragement, I think there would just be stick it out. Like try, don't just go once and be like, oh, wasn't for me, because probably most of us don't want people making the same assumption that we make about others in that moment. Like if somebody was like around me once and maybe it was a bad day, whatever, Alex, no, I don't want to be around him. I'm out. See ya. Like we wouldn't want those assumptions made about us, but we make them about others all the time.
I saw a meme yesterday that was like, have you ever left a social situation and just thought to yourself, not my best work? And it's like sometimes that's us after city groups,
yes,
like,
or
sure. after anything. But that applies.
Yeah. And then I think like the last one is I've got friends, and while community is a driving force, like this is more than that. And so, do you have friends? Yes. Do you have Christian friends? Sometimes the answer to that is no. You don't, yeah. Or you don't have many, or you don't have Christian friends that you're walking through the scriptures with and praying for one another and encourage. And so, like, it's not just, oh, I'm lonely, I need to be in a group, but it's, no, I'm not meant to live the Christian life in isolation. And so even though my social calendar is full, I'm going to intentionally, I forget how you said it early on, but like structure my week around this type of community that is really important for my growth and, in discipleship and my equipping in the Christian life.
And I'll say, for people who have never been a part of, we call them city groups, but who haven't been a part of those types of, kind of community groups, like from the outside, it looks like this formal thing because like, for us, city groups has a logo and a page on our website and brochures.
And it's really, it is really structured.
Yeah, it's really structured. But the groups that I can think of in our church and this could go the same for like our women's book clubs, for other kind of discipleship environments, the groups that are like, that have been running for a long time and they're truly functioning in the way that we want them to, like those people are probably the least mindful of like, now our city group is meeting. It's not like if, your group meets on Wednesdays at 6:30, you're like changing into your city groups t-shirt and putting on your city groups hat and like pulling out your notebook and you're perfectly poised. And then you hit, the clock starts at 6:30. You know what I mean? It's just
more
life.
Organic.
Yes. It's to use an overused churchy word. And so to kind of go back to your point about, someone who's in maybe a life phase, maybe you have a newborn or you have a sick person in your household, or, maybe you travel for your job, or, there's all these kinds of reasons why trying to, fit into this kind of scheduled thing can be difficult. I would say if you're someone who, if it's like, hey, but I live communally with my neighbors, there's people still kind of coming in and out of my home. I'm known, I'm taken care of. Like that might be a little different, but that's not the normal person. I think like because it's not like we read, in Romans, it's like, and then the city groups met together and and it was a church living in community, but,
sure.
But we have to kind of create these environments that bring the body of Christ together in intentional ways, because we don't naturally live like that. And our lives, our day-to-day lives between work and school and, our kids' activities or our activities, and stewarding your home and all those kinds of things, we don't naturally like gravitate towards this sense of living in community with others. And so, which is crazy because we're so connected to each other. So I think that's something to be mindful of as well is, this is something that the church, our church has intentionally put a ton of energy and thought, and time into and prayer into to help connect people. Because, if you're someone who's in the church and you hit a point of crisis, or, you need something, or the other shoe drops or whatever it is, the people that are going to catch you are the people that are you're surrounded by, who are your community. And so I just think that's important, to keep in mind. And I think to make another cultural point, we're so geared, of course, and we've talked about this on this podcast before, everything is so geared towards like the best experience. Like that's what we're all searching for in like a worldly sense. And so, if to the point of, you maybe try out 2 or 3 groups and each one just like feels a little awkward, or you're not immediately best friends with all of the people in the group, like that's okay. I mean, when I think about in the scriptures, when we sort of see or we have these glimpses into, Jesus has sinners gathered around him and they're eating together. I imagine that all those people don't have the exact same interests and wirings and personality makeups and hopes and dreams for their life. They're different. They're all different.
For sure.
And so I think that's one of the most awesome things about groups is that, yeah, even if you have what you feel like is a good community or a good circle of friends, like outside of the church, that's not the most important, and it's certainly not the most lasting thing. And so we have to even kind of reframe what we see as most important for our experiences of community.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. To pivot a little bit from that, but also in a sense, I think there may be a connection here is, oftentimes at least I think about church invitations as like a first step, like come on Sunday morning, like, hey, that like usually my default invite is to Sunday morning. Yeah. But there are certain people that for whatever reason, they have had poor church experiences. They are overwhelmed by like large gatherings, whatever it might be. There's plenty of reasons why somebody may not come to, 3215 Sessions Road on a Sunday morning right. First. I think like one of the best aspects of city groups can be evangelism. And it becomes another on-ramp into the Christian life for people where you can say, you know what, hey, like I know you're probably not going to come when we're going to stand in a room together, sing, like this dude's going to get on stage and right. preach the Bible that you don't believe for 30 minutes. And there's some coffee you can, you can drink if you're, need some caffeine, but like there are people that just isn't going to appeal to, but to be able to say, hey, at my home or at my friend's home, I gather with 10 other people and we study the Bible and we talk and have fun. And some groups have dinner or some groups, would you be interested in joining us for that? And people do, like people will say yes. And it's not necessarily always that they don't have other community, they do, but there is something unique. There is salt and light that is in that group that is different than the other community that they have. And so, I think I mentioned earlier, like the idea of accountability in sort of living on mission and evangelism, that a group can provide one another, but it also provides the opportunity to invite people into this. For certain people, a less threatening is maybe not the right word, but less intimidating, just kind of gathering where people can come and see what it means to live the Christian life in community with others and see glimpses of the gospel that they would miss in any other community that they might be involved in. And so I think to me, that's like another aspect of groups that maybe doesn't get talked about enough or can be underrated. And so like, I think for people in groups, that's a great first step to invite somebody into just seeing what it means to live in Christian community and to live life with other believers and to say, hey, look, I know you have community. I know you may not want to come with me on a Sunday morning, but like, would you come study the Bible with like 10 other people? I promise they're not weird. And that may be easier if it's like at your house, if you host the group or whatever, or hey, ride with me, we'll walk in together. You don't have to knock on a stranger's door. Right. That's another barrier to groups. I think that, it's like people are like, whose house am I going to?
Which is so funny because, and I do get it, especially like if you're, unchurched or you are skeptical or, or you just have hesitations about going. But I'm not saying that it's not nerve-wracking to do that, because it is.
Sure.
But not any more than like if you were invited to like a housewarming party for your coworker, you know, any of us, except for like the most bold, except for Dean and Sarah, you know, the extrovert who like thrives and in any crowd,
setting,
you know, all of us, if you're walking up to the door of a place, of a social gathering where you're not going to know most of the people and you have to be a little vulnerable, that makes all of us a little uncomfortable.
For sure.
But that's not a reason not to go.
Yeah. So anyways, all of that to say, I think that's right. All that to say, like, I think don't underestimate the aspect of evangelism in the context of Christian community, because I think so many people have community, so many people have, and just because Christian community, like, this isn't always true of Christian community, I don't want to, you know, sell something falsely, but oftentimes, like, your insert X group when the other shoe drops isn't going to be there. Or when, you know, they just aren't, because they don't really know necessarily sometimes how to deal with whatever you're going through or whatever's happening, or you think it's deep because, you know, it feels that way, but it's pretty superficial. And so kind of people don't, you know, and that's not always true. Like, the church doesn't get that right all the time.
Right.
Every city group doesn't handle, you know, care right all the time, or things like that. But there is oftentimes, as we've seen through our groups, when those needs have arisen, more often than not, it's their city group who's leading the charge, who's making sure that somebody has meals when a loved one passes away, or when they have a new baby, or that they have, you know, they're helping support financial needs, or whatever, you know, whatever those things are. And so I think it does allow us to prop up Christian community in a way that is sort of a city on a hill for other people to see. And so say invite people that are lost to your city group. Let them see, you know, let them ask questions about the scriptures. Let them, you know, kind of be able to create relationships so that evangelism can happen and thrive. Absolutely. And so I think that's an underrated aspect to city groups. This has not been a pencil dive. This has been more of a deep dive.
We really did
based on time. So somewhere in the middle of that, do you have any kind of closing or final thoughts on groups as we sort of wrap this up?
No, I would just encourage people to try them. If you're at City Church, absolutely, you know, connect, and let that be, you know, don't overthink it. Like, sometimes we overcomplicate things. It's like, here's what is offered, take it and embrace it and give it a try, and see, you know, maybe what the Lord builds and how he kind of cultivates community for you within that.
Yeah, that's well said. I think, like, discipleship happens, you know, not alone, but together. And so it's that, you know, there was an article I read earlier. It said something to the effect of, like, becoming like Christ is deeply personal, but is not meant to be private. And so, you know, there is something to be said about a group of people gathering together, committed to gathering for a period of time to pursue together the goal of becoming more like Christ, and to be, you know, better followers of Jesus, not for the sake of saying, look how good I am, or look how legalistic I am, but to be conformed to his image and transformed by the Spirit. So let that happen. Like, if it's in a city group, great. If it's in another context of Christian community, that's okay too. But make sure that you're not kind of walking the Christian life in isolation, but as a member of a church in community with other believers, kind of spurring each other on to good works and to growing into the image of Christ. And so, yeah, we would love, you know, that'll be our local on tap segment this week, is join us for the City Groups event.
There you go.
It'll be kicking off at Sessions Road at 5:00, you know, on Sunday night, August 29th. And this will be a great opportunity for you to meet others, for you to see, if you're in a group, to see people in other groups, to be encouraged by the way that the Lord is working in them and through their groups. And if you're not in a group and you want to get connected, it'll be a great opportunity to do that, to meet others, and to hopefully come together with a group of Christian community who can bear your burdens, who can encourage you, who can pray for you, and who can allow you to make sure that you're not living the Christian life alone. So hope this was helpful, and we will see you next week. Hopefully all of us will be back together again.
Full crew.
Get the band back together if we can help it, and we'll dive into another topic then. Thanks. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to The Local Dive, a podcast diving into deep and shallow musings about Christ, the church, and culture. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow The Local Dive on social media and continue the conversation with us on Instagram and Twitter at The Local Dive Pod.